Excellency Sebastian Kurz, Federal Chancellor of the Republic of Austria, Austrian and Rwandan officials and delegation, members of the media, good afternoon once again, and I'm pleased to welcome Chancellor Kurz to Rwanda on his first visit, which is a short but busy visit. The Chancellor and I have had productive discussion on bilateral issues, as well as the partnership between Africa and Europe. This week, we were pleased to welcome the ambassador of Austria to Rwanda, and we will work together to strengthen our bilateral relationship. We also discussed the Africa-Europe High-Level Forum, an important event which Austria and Rwanda will co-host later this month in Vienna. The reason is really being that Rwanda is the chair of the African Union, and Austria also holding the chair of the European Union. The forum will focus on unblocking potential of the digital economy as a pathway to inclusion and prosperity for both our continents. It's not just that. We will be discussing in a wider context all kinds of activities, investments, and partnerships that can bring and continue to bring Africa and Europe together, so that this can lead to positive developments on either side. Positive developments, for example, when we invest in Africa and invest properly, this will help the development of Africa. It will help our young continent, our young people to find jobs, to be able to create jobs, and so on and so forth. And actually stem, or reduce or stop in the end if that would be most desirable. When you have seen the problem between Europe and Africa, for example, around the migration problem. If you look at the numbers of people leaving our continent, going to Europe, you ask yourself, can this be managed properly? Can it be stopped? And how? The how, I think, is there. We should have done this long ago, in my view, Mr. Chancellor, but it's never too late to do the right thing, in my view. That is, if we, in our partnerships between Europe and Africa, had invested properly and forged a strong partnership and created the environment in our countries, in our continent, to retain, to actually appeal to people, our young people, that staying in your countries, in our continent, and is also better for you. You can find a job, you can find safety, stability, security around that. But this can always be helped by the kinds of investment we make. Not only the amounts, but the quality of the investments. Now, there are many things to deal with, if I may say again. If you look at the history of this migration, which has many facets to it, and I should not be misunderstood. I'm not a cynical person, but I need to say that, for example, at one point, for a long time, Europe was also either, let me use words you may not like, inciting or inviting actually people to go to Europe. Because at one point, the message was, no, your countries of Africa, they are governed badly, there's no this, there's no that, you should come to us. This is real, yes. The impression that was created was, if you have a problem in your country with your whatever it is, it doesn't matter to be whether it is false or true, just come to our paradise, to our place in Europe. And they came. And these people came to a point that people can't have them anymore. Now that's why people, what they are doing today, some of them, is what they should have done then, meaning the investments and also trying to understand why are people actually leaving their countries and going to some other place. What is it that we can do in that place to retain people there, to live there and feel happy about living in their countries? This was not done, and I still think in our conversations between Africa and Europe, we can still have this conversation. Can we identify, by the way, again, the kinds of investments or what you spend on people when they have come to Europe is so huge that if this could be invested in Africa, then probably you would use even a fraction of that to actually help create industries, create jobs, create the kinds of working with Africa, of course, because the problem is not Europe. Again, should not be misunderstood. I think we have our own fair share of the blame that we have to take. But I think working together will help address this problem, which has become, the way people are reacting to it from the distance, I mean, sometimes is like firefighting. And then sometimes firefighting is the wrong way because it doesn't put out the fire. Sometimes it actually inflames the fire and keeps running. So I'm just sharing these views with Your Excellency, Chancellor, and the media as well, which I think should take their own blame too. Sometimes the media misrepresents or magnifies the problem that is there. But I think there are also people who can be helpful we all need to soberly look at the problems because they are there, try to find solutions, even if they are complicated. We have to embrace them. We can't find an easy solution for a difficult problem. That's where I think, and that has in many cases even complicated the politics even of relationships and so on and so forth. So forgive me for expressing some of these things candidly, but they are not addressed to you, but through you to the colleagues in Europe, as I think I'm also speaking for our continent. And again, Mr. Chancellor, I look forward to working with you to ensure the success of this event coming up in your country and for Europe and Africa, and continuing to build a strong relationship between Austria and Rwanda. And again, I invite, I happily, and with my delegation and the country and the people, host you with your delegation. And if I may invite you for your remarks. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. If you allow, I would like to thank you and also your government, first of all, for receiving us, for the very interesting discussions we had today, but also for the good cooperation between your country and Austria. I would also like to congratulate you and also the people responsible here in Rwanda for the positive economic development of your country. During the last years in Rwanda, we had an economic growth rate of nearly 10%. Now it's 7%. It's an extremely high economic growth rate, and it's also impressive that the World Bank Index says that Rwanda is among the best places to do business in the world. I think many reforms which have been done go in the right direction and will have the outcome that a positive economic development can take place here in Rwanda. I would also like to thank you for your leadership in the African Union by establishing a free trade area for the whole continent. I think this is a very good development for Africa as a whole, and also one reason for a positive economic development in Africa. We also had the opportunity to discuss our bilateral relations and our economic exchange. I think we both agree that for Africa and for countries like Rwanda, it's necessary that we in Europe do not only ask ourselves how to educate Africa, and that we do not only ask ourselves what we think is the best for Africa, but that we also discuss with the African leaders in all the countries here what they think is needed in Africa. And one point where we agree is that a strong private sector, a positive economic development is the basis for wealth and is the basis for good living conditions for the people here in Africa. And therefore, nationally, we will increase our support for Austrian companies investing in Africa. The Austrian Development Bank will increase its portfolio in Africa for the next years to 55 million euros, and we will also launch an investment fund for SMEs of 10 million euros in order to make it easier for Austrian companies to invest in Rwanda, in Ethiopia, and also in other African countries. And not only nationally, we would like to be active also during the presidency in the European Union. We have a strong focus on a stronger cooperation between Africa and the European Union. And I would like to thank you, Mr. President, that we can invite together to the EU-African Forum on Economic Development and Innovation on the 18th of December in Vienna. It will be a high-level forum with African leaders, with leaders from the European Union, with commissioners, with the President of the Commission, and of course with many people from the private sector, which means people from the private sector in Africa and also from the private sector in Europe. We both think that a stronger economic cooperation between Africa and Europe is the basis for a positive development of our economies and is the basis for better living conditions for people in Africa, but also in Europe. I think that a strong economic exchange between Europe and Africa will be for the benefit of both Europe and Africa. Thank you, Mr. President, for the good discussion to many issues, and I hope that we were able to raise at least a few of the issues we were able to discuss before in our tete-a-tete and in our delegation meeting. Thank you.
Thank you very much.